there was a lot happening in the world as well, like at the same time. So I don't know. Yeah, I just kind of feel unmotivated, and I don't know. I just finished a book too, so there's that, and I was finishing that at the beginning of this, so I'm not sure. But I've started writing again, and now I'm actually doing short little pieces, maybe to do I don't just for no reason. I've been doing like 2-page strips and 1-page strips just for fun, like which is something I never do. I always work on my next book. It's kind of feels like back when I was a kid again, just doing things for no reason, which is kind of fun.
Sounds like a positive that you're actually like making art for the pure enjoyment of making art.
Exactly, yeah. Which is kind of I don't know, yeah, it's kind of different and return to your youth, which is nice.
I mean, otherwise, in a normal year, are you basically just kind of tied to a book schedule? Is it when you sit down and work on something, it's because it's clear that you've got some sort of long form piece on the horizon?
Usually, yeah. Usually, I finish a book and then I'll sit down and I'll do a couple of months of like just reading and just debriefing, kind of, and then it's I've already formulated kind of what my next thing might be, and then after a couple of months of just goofing off, I start to get down to work. And I don't know if it's like my old factory worker instincts, but I'm a bit of a workaholic, and so I just like when I'm not at my outside job or doing freelance stuff, I just work like from when the kid would go to school. I'd sit down at 8:30 and work till the kid came home. I'd make dinner, hang out with the family, and by 9:30 I'm back down there in the basement working till 11:30, 12 at night. And that's a regular, normal thing for me. And I like it because I enjoy it, but it's probably too much. It's bad. It's like I started to get a screwed up shoulder because of like sitting so much. I went to an osteopath and they were like, "So, do you do anything repetitive?" And I go, "Well, oh, how long do you do that?" And I go, "I don't know, 12, 14 hours a day." And they're like, "Oh my God." And then they're like, "How do you sit?" And I was like, kind of like this, and I'm hunched over. And they're like, "You're doing everything wrong." So they gave me some exercises and like just to tell you to take breaks, like it, and that's changed a lot. Like just not continually doing it and just hunkering down, listening to audiobooks when I'm drawing, and just getting lost for hours and hours.
Have you read that Creota book that she put out about?
Oh, yeah, I haven't, and I've looked through it, but like, I mean, I'm an unhealthy person. I should read that and I should follow it because like Creota's like she's obviously, really studied this and it's concrete ways to improve your health if you're an artist. So yeah, it's on the shelf. I have to read it.
I gave up coffee 2 weeks ago because I was just like at a point where I was drinking 6 cups a day, which is too much. So I just quit cold turkey. And I'm definitely somebody who operates in the extremes when it comes to things like that. I've noticed that this book deals with alcoholism to some degree, and your past books have dealt with alcoholism. And I've heard you describe this in an interview where, when it comes to that, you're kind of an all or nothing kind of person.
Yeah, my wife describes me as an all or nothing with everything, and I'm a bit of a mental case about that. Like, so yeah, when I was drinking, I drank a lot all the time, and probably dangerously so. And I always shied away from ever saying, that I was an alcoholic, but I'm pretty sure that I was. Technically, I was, yes. So I had eased off things. I never drank when I was younger. I was like a moderate my whole life, and then my first marriage fell apart like after 14 years, and I literally it was like a switch turning, and I became a drunk, and well, for years I was that, and so and it's part of your identity when that's what people know you as, like he's the guy that drinks the most, and he's and I was that, and then I'd eased off, but I still drank a lot. Like I would work at night, and I would have either single malt or bourbon there, and I'd have my little special glass, and I'd all night I'm sipping and sipping, um, much less than when I was in my heavy drinking stage, but it was too much still. So there was one New Year's I just said I'm gonna try and quit for a year, and it was this radical thing to do, and then I realized after I got through the hard part of that, which is the first couple of months, drinking a lot of club soda and in fancy glasses, to try and distract yourself. I got through it, and then I felt like after a year of it, I was like, I kind of like this. I saved a lot of money. I was functioning better. I was drawing better. The first book I drew without booze was the Seabrook book, which is ironically about a massive, lifelong alcoholic. Um, and I found it looked better. It was a better end product. It was less goofy, a lot less weak drawing. I think that was one of my strongest drawn books. So I just stuck with it. I think I've been like 9 years off of the sauce, and I still like it. I mean, I miss the idea. I think that's the hardest part: reinventing yourself for one, and secondly, just saying goodbye to something forever. Like that, there was like that was a big old thing to do, but ultimately good.
I quit drinking a couple of years ago as well, really just to kind of try it out to see if it took. And I never said forever. I was something I was trying out, and it's been, I guess, like 2 years this past month. And I actually, I don't think that I necessarily had a problem. I just wanted to see, like, what life would be like without it. I don't know. Maybe it builds up gradually, but when I start to do something, I become very intense about it, and work is definitely similar. I mean, do you think that with your own personality type that there are some parallels there?
It's definitely a problem with me. Like I'm like I do have those impulses to do things to extreme, either all or nothing, and it's unhealthy. And it's like my wife's like always a middle path, and it's wise to be that way. And I try and be that way. But I'm less successful. I think with booze, it's probably good to not try if you've had a past experience of problems with it. You do the middle path really for most people. So and that's fine. Like I mean, it was like my friend Billy told me when I said, Billy, I'm never gonna drink again. That's it. He goes, oh Joe, you drank enough. He goes, you had a good run, and it's like it's true. I really did. So I can't complain. But yeah, with work, yeah, I would say that again is unhealthy. I would not spend as much time like reading or doing other things. I mean, I didn't distract from my family life because I would meet up with my wife at like after at 11:30 or whatever. We'd watch a movie or whatever. But and I spent time with my kids and all that. But there's definitely a weird compulsion to work too much. But it's a common thing with cartoonists, and I'm glad some of the younger cartoonists are rejecting that work ethic, that dumb macho work ethic, and I think that's good.
Macho is an interesting way of putting it, but I do think that when it comes to something like not just being a cartoonist, but actually putting out, graphic novel or a full length book, there is perhaps a net benefit at the end of the day to really throwing yourself into a project.
Oh yeah, it's enjoyable. Like I mean, I love it. I get so into it and like seeing the stack of pages growing, and I always I guess again like it's because of like a work ethic thing that I have to go at the end of the day. The last thing I do is I look at what I've done that day, and I have to look at it, and then I feel good if I've accomplished something. So, and I don't do that when I'm in my goofing off stage. I have nothing to look at the end of the day, and I kind of it's kind of disappointing. I guess I need to look for self worth in other ways than in my work at the end of the day. I guess that's what it comes down to, really.
I talk to a lot of people who make comics, obviously, and anyone who's going to like write a book or make a full length graphic novel, it just seems like such an insurmountable task to me that it's something that I don't think you can really finish unless you're driven in that way.
Yeah, you do have to be somewhat driven, that's for sure. And I think people that don't do it are really like when people talk to me, they look at a book and they're like, oh my god, you did all that? Like, how did you do all that? And I'm like, you just do it a page at a time, And it's like, but for someone who has never done that, they're like, oh, wow, they're overwhelmed by the amount of work in it. And I guess, but it's like, I mean, I loved reading that A Drifting Life, that Tatsumi memoir. Love that book because it's so much about comics. It's just like so immersed in comics and the love of comics, but it's also that obsessional that the manga artists that would die, like just drawing themselves to death, like overwork and smoking too much and drinking too much coffee and everything. It's kind of a, I guess that in a weird way that also appeals to me. That kind of I feel like I'm not working hard enough when I read that book.
And this is certainly something that applies to aspects of this book or the biography that you alluded to earlier. Is we do tend to romanticize not just workaholics, but we kind of, in a really dark way, tend to romanticize people who basically drink themselves to death.
Oh yeah, definitely. I honest to God, I think this all the time. I'm so struck by memoirs of drinking where it's actually uh, portrayed in a negative light. You don't see people like, pissing their pants and, in a public place or something like that. It's little things like, oh, they missed the kid's birthday party or because they were drunk and that, and it's like you kind of feel sorry for them, and it's not like as dark as it should be because it can be. It's a horrible thing, and I do think that it romanticizes it. A lot of addiction memoirs, like drug addiction and alcohol addiction, they don't. I think that they do make it somewhat strangely appealing, like romanticized. Yeah.
A person's family or a person's liver are kind of collateral, right? If at the end of the day they produce something great to a certain degree, and certainly this is changing for the better, but to a certain degree, you're willing to forgive them for being a terrible person because, like, clearly all of that was required in order for them to make great art.
Right. Which is not, not nice people can make good art. Like, it's like, I don't know, like Orwell was said about Dali, like, that in that essay about him, that you can hold two ideas in your mind at the same time, that Dali's a great artist and a horrible human being. And it's like, and it could be conversely, it could be that someone could be a nice human being and also a good artist. It's possible to be both. I don't think that it's necessary. That tortured artist thing is kind of, I don't know. But then again, it's funny because when I look back and I look back at some of the work that I produced when I was in my darkest points in my life, that stuff, I'm like, wow, who is this guy? Like, I do a different kind of work, I guess. But it plumbed some depths of emotional work that I don't know that I'd be capable of now. And maybe that's because I'm very happy and content. I don't know. Or maybe it's not. I don't know.
The cartoonist that you portray in the new book, the father of the narrator, it sounds like to some degree it's a character that is playing off of those impulses that you see and don't like in yourself. Is he sort of like the logical conclusion of this terrible impulse to just kind of work yourself to death?
No, I mean, there's certain elements the father. No, I don't relate to him at all myself. Like, I just found him to be it'd be interesting to create a character who made this thing that's so beloved and everybody loves, and he's not even that interesting. Like, he's a mundane character. He's just selfish and brutal and mean, and he's not even interesting in his brutality. He's just kind of mundane. But the son, I think, some of his bad aspects are like totally like like that scene where he's yelling about his partner taking his last fake beer, and I mean that's like I am my greatest fault is a impatience, and I probably have barked at my partner like that, like he's like, oh my god, did you do this? And then she'd be like, oh, it's right here, and I'm like, and so there's, I guess I played it up more than in real life, but like those are like, you're always taking from your own experience no matter what, like when you're writing. I mean, I think everybody does that. So, but the father, yeah, I don't relate to him that much. No,
You connect more closely to the son. You feel like
I
he's
think so. Yeah, yeah, he's flawed too. I mean, it's interesting. Like, I thought, I hope that people will not be turned off that they're really not that lovable characters. Like, I mean, I mean, the son is trying. He tries to change. He tries to learn something, but I don't know if he does. But I think I don't mind that. I can watch a film with unpleasant characters and still enjoy it. I don't have to relate to them on a level of like, oh, that's how I would act in that situation. Like, I hope people will be okay with that.
I do get the feeling that that's another thing that's changing, not necessarily for the better, is that people can't enjoy like movies, for example, with unlikable characters in the way that I think they used to be able to. That they need to find there needs to be some redeeming quality, or they don't necessarily feel that this story is worth telling.
Yeah, that's strange to me. It's almost like I don't know. It's like not trusting the audience's maturity. Like I think that people can handle it. I think they can see a book and go like, I don't think that he's presenting this as good behavior. He's just they're presenting this as human behavior, and it's hopefully interesting. Like that's I think you have to give an audience credit and that they can handle that. I think you should you should be producing that kind of work sometime.
The father, who again is, in some ways a central character, or perhaps even the central character to the story, is not the main character. And there's a reason why, you decided to shift it to the son, who, like you said, is a more likable character, in that, like, at least he sees faults in himself, and at least he is trying to change. Why does he become the central figure for the story?
Because he's like dealing with more, like he's actually examining things and looking at life, and that's more interesting to me, whereas the father is just barreling along, like he doesn't question he's it's like I find anyone who's in a position of being revered and having power, it's a dangerous thing, and they often become dicks. Like it's inevitable almost. It's very hard, I think, for someone who's a celebrity or something to not become a dick, because everyone around you is like going, "Yeah, right, that's amazing," and everything you say and everything you do, and you're never put called to task for anything. So whereas the son is like, he's dealing with like emotional hurt and stuff from his childhood, and trying to be in a relationship and trying to work that relationship, and unsuccessfully often, and but at least he's trying, and I just find that more interesting than the thought. But that could have been a whole other take. Like, I mean, that we just get the narrator's perspective on that, on the father. He could have a And there's one point where he actually questions that. He goes, he doesn't know what his father's relationship was like with his father, like, or his mother, like he doesn't know that because he never asked him.
There's an interesting point, and I don't know if this qualifies as a spoiler or not. Hopefully, somebody listening 20 minutes in will have at least read most of the book. But there is I think perhaps the most interesting moment in the book comes when the main character realizes that his father, the famous cartoonist, the roles had shifted in the cartoon characters that he was portraying. That he had always thought that the child character was a surrogate for himself, but the math changes a good deal if the father is drawing himself as a child.
That's it, and that was a realization that he has in the middle of the book, sort of, or after, in the second half of the book, and it's like, it's just that was just like a realization that I had. It's funny, like there's things that come up when you're writing a book that you don't plan, because I operate on instinct a lot, and so there was that notion came to me. Like I was like, what if he's not writing about his own son? What if he's writing about his relationship with his father? And that goes into the story. And there was the other part where he's talking about how he doesn't have daddy issues or whatever, and then I realized at one point that his partner is James. It's the same name as his father. Like, and it didn't occur to me when I wrote that, but it's like, I added that in, I think, as well into the storyline. So I guess some of these things you just discover as you go along, writing a thing, they reveal themselves, kind of. I don't know, it seems like that to me. Like I things just like happen in this weird organic way, and I just trust instinct and I go with that.
At what point in the process are you really open to making those kinds of changes?
Oh, the whole time.
Even when you're drawing?
Yeah, yeah. I mean, it's funny. I was listening to Brecht Evans today. He was doing a live Instagram live on D&Q, and he was talking about what was the phrase he used? It was like, basically, he said he'd hate to plan his work so much that he would just become his own illustrator. And I thought, that's really interesting, because that's what I do. Like I write, and I think I'm a bit stronger of a writer than I am an artist. So I really work the writing, and I'll spend a year writing a script and editing, and I write longhand, then I type in, and then I do my edits, and then I re-edit, and I print it out, and then I break it down into, storyboard it, and in my 9 panel grid, and I do that. So it's like, I keep saying this, but it's like, it really rings true to me. It's like, Alfred Hitchcock said about his favorite part of the process of filmmaking was the writing and the storyboarding. He goes, because the filming was almost a mechanical process. It was just, following those things he'd already set up. And it is like that for me, but I do edit. More so now that I'm older, because I'm less satisfied with, when I was younger, I would have let things go. A weak panel drawing or something that didn't work, I would go, oh, that's good enough. But as I get older, I'm more fussy and I won't let things go. I'm a little more obsessive, and I rework things, and I added a whole section at the end of that book that wasn't there because it wasn't right. It didn't feel right, and it needed more. And I took out this other part and added much more to it. So I do a lot of editing through the whole process, more so now that I'm older. Yeah, I look back at old stuff and the draw. I mean, I'm a weak drawer, and sometimes the heads in my early books, the heads are gargantuan. They wouldn't A human body couldn't carry that head. And I sometimes, when I would reprint those stories in other collections, I would shrink the heads because they were just ridiculously oversized.
When you have a realization like the father being his own surrogate in a comic strip, or the two names being the same, how much does that change the math? How much does that change the trajectory of the story that you were planning to tell?
It changes a little, like not gigantically. I suppose if it was a giant realization that just didn't occur to you, then it could. But like I say, I work the writing so much that by the time I'm drawing, it's I've hopefully thought of most big aspects of it, and it's just the smaller things that wouldn't occur to me. But I'm open to, like, if something would happen that I would say I need to make a massive change, I would do it. Because I want it to be right. I'm never satisfied anymore with if things are clunky. Because you know what, when they are, I don't look at my books after they're done much because you're tired of them, you're sick of looking at them. But when I do, and it'll be those same things that will, a single word or a line or a wrong panel drawn, those things will poke me in the eye every time, and it's so I just want to avoid that for future books. I just really try and fix that before it's out there.
How different is the pre-planning process in writing a biography of a real existing person versus doing straight fiction?
Yeah, it's fiction is nice. It was nice to return to it. It was a really cool experience doing the research for a biography. Um, and I tried to be as accurate as possible. Um, I did, a little, kind of creative nonfiction, merging, characters that were similar, like a
Sure.
little bit of fudging. And I described that in the notes in that. Um, but it's hard to write fiction because the story is there. And you can't change the narrative arc. You're stuck with what it is. And if you're presenting it as like a narrative, like not like a strictly nonfiction book, but like you're telling, I mean, it's a comic. I had to make it like a story that you could read. So the only tools you have are, suppression and exemplify, or what's the word I'm looking for? Like putting more accent on certain elements. That's how you can affect the story to make it work as a dramatic narrative.
Heighten some
Yeah,
aspects.
that's it. Yeah. So that was that. So it was nice to return to fiction and to not have those restrictions. Like, you can always make it go however you want, however your story needs to go. So that was refreshing. Doing the nonfiction was fun because it was like I traveled. I went to North Carolina and met with Seabrook's son, and he had a trunk of his papers, and I went through those and photos and articles of clothing from like when he was in the army and stuff, and that was amazing. And I went to Oregon, to the University of Oregon, and I went through Seabrook's second wife, Marjorie Worthington, who was a writer, and she had donated her papers there. So I had white gloves on, and I was going through these papers and making notes and taking photos, and it was like I was in, A.S. Byatt's possession, like, these nerdy kind of. It was so outside of my experience. I'm not an academic. I didn't go to university, so it was really intriguing thing to do, and I felt like it was out of my league a lot of the time. And yeah, it was interesting because at the same time, my wife, who is an academic, was writing her PhD thesis, and I felt like I was this dumb weirdo aping her, like she's you know doing the real thing, and I was just goofing around making a comic book about somebody's history.
During that process, when was it clear that you wanted to make footnotes, that you wanted to really break down the line between fiction and nonfiction?
Just to be straightforward, I think I always knew I would do that. So I'd kept pretty good notes, where sources where I was getting stuff from. I didn't do a proper bibliography. I just did all of the books that I referred to. Um, but but the notes, like, I guess I knew I would do that. Like I love reading Chester Brown's notes. Like, and every time I do notes in the back of a book, it's a little nod to Chester because he loves them so much. And so yeah, so I knew I would always do it. So I did keep records the whole time. I tried to keep it real, like, so that I was had a record of where I was finding things and sourcing material and that. So.
There's a preface to this book that almost plays that role to some degree. That role of it's very interesting, and I'm trying to remember another book that I've seen this in, or at least another comic that I've seen this in, where you're like, I'm trying to get out in front of this thing to let you know that I understand that this story that I'm telling is not wholly original.
Yeah, that was what one of the early reviews of the book was like, saying like that it was that I was like positioning myself to just say like I'm aware of this, like I know that these other books exist that have touched on similar themes. But when I started writing it, I was not aware of that. I mean, it didn't seem like the most original idea in the world. I figured there must have been stuff done, but I wasn't aware of them. I'd never come across them. So yeah, it was just like, yeah, and 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 my ignorance of comics history, like, it's a pretty basic thing, like the Dennis the Menace story. And I guess at some level, I mean, I had heard it, but it didn't retain that with me, or maybe it did, and in a lower part of my psyche. But it's a very different story than that. But anyway, when Peter Bagg was, we were at this book event together, and we were hanging out, and he told me that, and he goes, "You're writing Dennis the Menace. That's Dennis the Menace." And I'm like, "Oh shit, no, it's not Dennis the Menace." Anyway, so yeah, I just thought it was smart to present that and let people know, like, that I'm aware of that, and I incorporate it into the story, like, it because it made sense. It was a juxtaposition, like him talking about it, like, and his dad knowing Ketchum and that. So
That is the absolutely organic way to do it, and you did it in the book. There is a self-awareness in the book that, and in a way, the real characters and the fictional characters in the book do kind of run parallel, and they both exist in this universe. Obviously, you're poking fun at yourself in the preface, at the end of the preface, when you, like, Peggy and Julia make an appearance in there, where they're like actually like dragging you off the panel. Were you worried that doing that was maybe a bad impulse to have that at the top of the book?
no, I'm a big one for transparency, so I was just like, I felt like I wanted to just address it in, like, in an introduction. Just, and I kind of like introductions. Like, I just read Glenn Head's new book, Chartwell Manor. It's brilliant, and it's dark and hard to read. Like, it's but he writes an introduction just stating what he was trying to do with it. Like, it's trying to be as completely honest as possible, and it's going to be hard for a lot of people to read. And he doesn't want to upset people, but he wanted to do it, and he needed to do it. So I think it's good to just, like, be straightforward with things. So I do it in a goofy manner because that's the way I do things. So I just put it out there. But yeah, I mean, it's funny. I'm lucky. I always worry, because I'm old, and like, I'm an old white guy. I'm an old straight white guy, and I'm just worried, like that people are going to be annoyed by me, and so I've been very lucky with reviews. People are kind to me in reviews, and I mean, this book is about old rich white people, and it's like, so I address that in the story as well. Like, I just to I am aware that it's that, but it's the thing I was writing at the time. I don't know. I find it hard to write about politics and things that I'm passionate about. Like, I mean, I'm a longtime, socialist, and I love and I admire people that can write like stuff on the nib, and other just people that are able to write passionate like stuff about politics, like Eleanor Davis. Like the things she can do blows my mind, and I can't do it. When I try and write about stuff, I'm so angry about it that it's just a boring, angry screed. Like there's no joy in it. There's nothing positive in it. It's just I'm too angry about the political situation in the world to write about it well. And I admire people that can, like Tom Tomorrow, like those kind of guys. Like Ruben Bowling, these people, and Matt Boers, all these people, they can do it so well, and I cannot. So I do what I do.
A lot of them, or most of them, do eventually burn out. I mean, I don't know like exactly what's happening with Matt right now, but Matt has obviously stepped away from it. And I'm trying to remember his name. There was a cartoonist like 10 years ago who had a political book on Fantagraphics and was well known for it, and just had to used to wear suits all over the place. You know what I'm talking about? Tim Kreider. Yeah, I mean, Matt Boers is obviously at least like temporarily stepped away from it, and Tim Kreider obviously felt the need to, and that was well before all the Trump stuff was happening here. Obviously, Tom Tomorrow, Ruben Bowling, I mean, they're kind of rare breeds in that respect. I don't think that even if you're very good at it and can do it for a while, I don't think it's sustainable. I don't think it's a healthy way for people to go through life.
It's like immersing yourself in a bath of acid every day, and like if you have a big heart, and obviously people that are drawn to that kind of critiquing politics do, like they care about justice, they care about people. It's got to be hard on you. Like I mean, I know, like I've always been ranting about politics. I believe that's what poisoned my first marriage initially. She had an affair on me, so that ultimately killed it. But it was like, I was it took me years to come to the point where I was like, maybe you had some part in that too, Joe, like by being hard to live with, because I was ranting about politics all the time, and I was so angry about the world and disappointed by humanity. So I try not to be so much that, and I probably would be unhealthy for me to do that kind of stuff, because I think it would be hard. I can see people burning out and taking a break from it.
There's a reason. I think there's a reason why, Tom, for example, is not doing graphic novels. There's a reason why he's doing these as strips. Sitting down and trying to do a 200-300 page book about it, and being in that mind state for that long would drive you absolutely crazy.
There's who's that other one in Fantagraphics called Mr. Fish?
Mr. Fish, yeah. He did the Ralph Nader book recently.
Yeah, the work that they do is amazing. Like very insightful and beautifully drawn, and yeah, I don't know. I have great respect for the people that can do it. I just can't.
Not political, but like you're very clearly drawn to tragic figures to some degree. I mean, that's certainly a through line through a lot of your work.
Yeah, I don't know why that is. It's been my whole life. It's funny. Like I mean, I love depressing movies. That's my go-to. Like the sadder it is, the better. And just I don't know why. I'm not a tragic figure myself. Like I'm lucky. I've had a largely straight, easy life. I don't. That's not true. Everybody has something. I got married when I was 17. And I worked in a factory, and went to school, finished high school during the day, and worked in a factory at night. So I guess sure, we all have our little hardships, and yeah.
What I think it is, and what I find with myself is, this is especially for whatever reason, this is especially the case when I have musicians on the show. I would rather talk to a musician in their 70s who has seen some shit, instead of like some like 19-year-old who is just about to, release the first record and it's on EMI and like, nowhere to go but up. I think stories are more interesting when people have been through stuff. And I think that this is the case with a tragic figure. I mean, like, for example, there have been cases, I do like reading biographies, and there have been cases with like that, that 3-volume Churchill biography where I only read the last volume, because to me, that is the most interesting part of a person's story.
Yeah, that's true. I think that's true. A lot of what you say there. Like, I think I say that there are people that you will meet in life, and they operate at a different level because of the shit that they've been through. Um, they they can cut through things, and they see differently, and they can understand people better sometimes. Like, sometimes things damage people, and it doesn't make them operate better in the world, or be more insightful or anything. But sometimes, yes, I think people that have been through things, hard things, um, they operate at a different level, and I find I always find when you meet people like that, you can sense it in them, something about them. Especially if you're in trouble with something, the way that they speak to you and they can offer advice, or just listen. It's you can tell that they've been through something big.
There was a quote that I read in one of your interviews that I thought was super interesting, and I wish that the interviewer had like pulled it out a little bit more. So I'm going to pull it out a little bit more here because I think this is one very essential to the book, and I think it was perhaps said in a context, where it relates to your own life. But you said parenting is always doomed to failure.
Mm. Yeah, well, true. I mean, I have like three kids. I have two older girls from my first marriage that are in their 30s. Because like I said, I started when I was 17. And then I've got a soon to be 16-year-old, and they're all amazing kids. They're all like, grade A student, honor roll students. They all were, and but like, I know with my girls, with the divorce, when the divorce happened, yeah, shit went down that was not cool. Like, basically, two parents that had been perfect, like helicopter parents, like, basically went bananas, and were in their own world of bullshit. And so I carried that around a lot. I feel I the weight of that is like, my daughters are always like, "Oh, shut up, we're fine," But I know that they went through a lot of stuff, and that was all because of that, parental failure. Like, so I've tried really hard not to bungle things in with my son. Like, it's to try and keep things protected. And with my girls, I try and bring it up. I like to talk about things. Like, I'm a person that I think you got to say things out loud. It's important to say things out loud, make statements of things that you've done, take responsibility for your actions. It's important to the people that have been affected by them. Yeah, yeah, I carry a lot of, and some of things never can be resolved. You can live with things, but you can't resolve them. Like, they're just, you neglected to be a good parent, and even if you realized it and came back and took over again, it's a little too late if you leave it for a long time. So those are, oh god, yeah, that's a good point. I mean, this is why I'm drawn to tragic figures. I mean, we all have our tragedies, like, and you live with them, and you live with your flaws and your mistakes, and that's all you can do, is live with them and try and do better and try and make reparations for the failures.
There's an interesting thing at play here. It's something that I've thought about, and I think is something that is expressed in fiction in a lot of places because it is sort of a universal concept. The main character in this book is somebody in his, what would you say, like late middle age, maybe? Is that, or even later?
I imagine about like my age, like 55.
And he's dealing with a very elderly parent, and I think that maybe not necessarily spoken out loud, but there is a tension around the question of at what point in your life do you just like stop blaming your parents for fucking you up,
Yeah,
and can you?
yeah, I think people, it's healthy to do, because you can't change it anyway, so you might as well accept and move on. And it's funny, like, I mean, with me, it's the opposite. Like, I'm going to my kids, and I'm like, I'm sorry, and I'm trying to like talk it out, and they're like, we're fine, it's fine, just like get on with your life. But to me, it's important to address, and it's important to talk about. And he can't get over it, and it's like, maybe because he's had an easy, spoiled life, like, he obsesses about these things, whereas someone who had other bigger problems wouldn't obsess about them. But again, it's like I think I say in the book, like even small problems and first world problems are they're problems. You know, you have to deal with them. Otherwise, they will mess up every aspect of your life. So yeah, I don't think he ever gets over anything really with his dad. He tries to work it out, but I don't think. But some things don't get resolved, right? Like there's no clear for some things. It's just they are what they are.
There is a question of how much of that poor parenting was imagined or
Yeah.
almost projected.
Hmm. It's possible that he's just yeah, it might be over the top like but then his mother does corroborate some of that, right?
Yeah.
She, she does.
I think she kind of plays both sides of the fence on that
Yeah.
question.
Yeah. I guess I like her. I think she's an interesting character. She's kind of cold, but she's also um she's kind of in his corner more so than the father, and she is operating on a bit more of an emotional level, but not much because of her own upbringing, which was a cold kind of upbringing. She didn't have the skills to be a warm human being, you know. So, but she does good within her limited ability.
She would be the most interesting character, I think, to like continue on to see what happens to her, because she states that there were just ways that things were done back then, that, you know, like a woman supported her man, and it's clear he alludes to this a little bit, and there are some glimpses of this, but like it's clear that after an entire lifetime of being married to a terrible person, that she's really finally starting to come out of her shell.
Yeah, she was. Yeah, and I wanted to show that kind of like like that. I mean, I think she operated and did her thing, but she still, for some reason, stayed with him, and for whatever reason, and she tries to explain to herself or justify that why, because that's what people did, and money or whatever. Um, but yeah, I think as soon as he's dead, she can't fake mourning really, which is kind of interesting to me. I think it's I don't I always hate when someone dies and they instantly become like this sainted figure. I think it's good to be realistic about what people were like. So yeah, I think she's just yeah. Again, Pearl was an interesting character. I really liked writing her, and I thought she was fun. Yeah.
You referenced the Schultz book in there, and I seem like you, like every other person remotely interested in comics, read the Schultz book like right when it was published. And there was a big question around that, around, you know, not only like how much of this was actually true and accurate to his character, but whether or not publishing a book like that does a disservice to the legacy of this artist.
I don't think it's a disservice. I think the truth is always of service. You know, like I think it's important. I think everybody still knows that he was a kind and not like decent father. Like I do think he was probably very flawed, and probably had a lot of flaws, and those came out in the book. I don't think he was as maybe as cold as Michaelis portrayed him as, but maybe he was. The kids didn't seem to think so, and they were outraged by that. He was cold with his first wife, but they weren't they weren't a good match. Like and when he found his match with Jeannie, like you could see that they were really really in love. Like, and I mean, sometimes people are poor matches, and they bring out the worst elements in each other. And then if you're lucky enough to find the right person, and they actually bring out the good in you, and you bring out the good in them, well, like how lucky is that?
Joe, it sounds like you may be speaking from experience here.
I am. I'm like this is like my wife Tyann. Like she's like patient, amazing, wise person, and she continually laughs at my jokes, and like we enjoy each other's company. Like it's like, and we like the same things. We're incredibly lucky. Yeah, I I constantly instead of complaining about little things, I am constantly trying to be grateful, like just for like how friggin' lucky I am. Like that's, and I never thought I could be happy. That was the other thing. When I was a post, even during my divorce, long it was long because I stayed. We our marriage was over, and we stayed together for like 5 years almost, just because the kids were young, to try and make things normal, and not a good plan. But I thought I was a depressed and drunk and suicidal person for many years, and I thought I could never ever be happy again. and you can, like, it's possible. And I can't even, I was revisiting my journals from those years. I don't even recognize that person. Like, that's how different you can be. Like, it's possible. So I'm lucky enough to have come out of like black dark places, and I don't know. I think I'm so lucky where I'm at in life right now that like I can be worried about something and I'll lie my head on the pillow and I'm like, oh God, what am I gonna and I before I even finish the worry, I'm asleep. Like, I'm lucky. I'm a lucky bloody person. So
We talked about this a little bit earlier, about whether I think misconception that you have to suffer to some degree in order to make great art. At these different points in your life, during your ups and downs, do you think that you made your best work when you were your happiest?
different. I think my like saddest stuff, the short story collections, the first two books I did, that was written and drawn in absolute darkest period of my life. And I I still, when I think about those stories, like, they're, I don't know, like, people have written to me and they've said like how moving they were. They thought they were all written by the person that it actually happened to. So I don't know, maybe because I was in this like deep emotional place, I was able to get inside the minds of those characters somehow and express things differently. But I don't know. I think, I don't know, as you get older, it's funny. Like, I don't know. It's like a, not to say you're an old hack or something, but I may have done like deeper emotional content in those books, but I'm convinced that I'm doing better work, like in the scope of the work. Like, it's like I feel like confident in my abilities now, as at this stage of my career, that I could take, you could throw anything at me and say, make this story, and I could sit down and I could make a really good functional story about that. And maybe I couldn't have done that when I was younger. I would have had to do, well, exactly what I wanted to do. So I'm more confident in my abilities in general as I'm old, as I'm happier and older. But I think those were deeply emotional times, and the work showed that.
As somebody who is drawn to flawed characters, it sounds like when you were at your most flawed, or at your most depressed or vulnerable, that you were almost able to inhabit the characters in a way that you can't now. And one of the things I was curious about in this book is you do draw yourself. You do, like, you kind of, you are a framing device listening to a podcast interview with the artist. And I mean, ultimately, beyond just sort of the very simple way of framing it, is that a way of distancing yourself from these characters?
Possibly. I never thought of it. I just thought, I listened to a lot of podcasts and that, so it just seemed like a logical thing to an intro to it and introduce the character because he's on the podcast. Who knows? Like, that's possible deeply, and like, as I say, I operate on instinct a lot. So it's possible that that was some deep level of thinking, but definitely not consciously. No, no, I couldn't take credit for that. No.
So there's two things happening there, that you're doing the framing and, like, very clearly say this guy sounds like an asshole
Yeah.
at the top of the book.
That never occurred to me. I'm saying my own character sounds like an asshole. It's true.
I don't know if it's like almost a way of easing into the character or giving people some preface that they will be dealing with a lot of intentionally or unintentionally bad actors.
That's fascinating, Brian. That's really good. That's amazing that didn't occur to me, that I'm like actually saying that. I guess that's me distancing myself, or just setting the tone. Like, this is what you're going to be dealing with. Yeah, but didn't consciously occur to me. No, couldn't take credit for that. There's sometimes you'll read reviews of your work, and they'll attach like really amazing structure, and I'm like, Jesus, I wish I was that smart to like have written that. But that's people's interpretation, and I love reading reviews. Sometimes I enjoy reviews of books and movies more than I enjoy the books or the movies. Like, if it's a really good reviewer. So yeah, I guess, but it's interesting what people will their insight they'll bring to it.
A third thing, and this is just occurring to me as I'm saying this, because I am somebody who podcasts and I am somebody who talks to artists a lot. And I really like the format because it gives you a long form conversation in a way that you couldn't, in more traditional formats. But even in spite of that, if the person is having a bad day or if they don't like the particular subject matter, it is very easy for somebody to come across as a one-dimensional asshole. And it sounds like, it feels to me, reading the book, that the book is a way of sort of being like, yeah, this guy kind of is an asshole, but like, let's explode that a little bit and let's explore how this person developed.
Yeah, I think also it's like the me character that's listening to him. He's in love with this fictional cartoonist, and I'm protective of people that I love. Like when people talk shit about Schultz, when I read that Michaela's biography, I was pissed at like him. I was like, I didn't like that he was saying anything bad about him. So I could understand his kids being pissed and Jeannie Schultz being pissed about it. Um, so yeah, I think that was also just partly that, like that he's a fanboy and he doesn't like the kids bad mouthing his hero. Like if one of the some kid Schultz went out and badmouthed Schultz, I would be at first I would be pissed, and then I would be like, oh, maybe I should listen to this. Maybe it's true.